Is there a sort of negative stigma associated with labeling yourself as a farmer? That last slide that you presented kind of to different groups who don't want to be called farmers. So,
in some circles, I think ranchers don't like to be called farmers just as it's a kind of a matter of pride, because there are people in Texas that raise a lot of crops and they just want to be distinguished from that. But I think in maybe in big cities, a farmer is, it's kind of a lower person. I mean, that's probably changing, and I don't want to generalize, but I have a feeling that for a lot of people, being called a farmer, they assume that they don't have college degrees, that they just, kind of do stuff, a lot of manual labor, and farming is becoming very sophisticated, and there's a lot of high technology involved. So it kind of depends on what a person thinks. But the rancher thing is just more of a, somehow they just, like we're ranchers, we're not farmers. Not that we hate farmers, but we're ranchers. If you buy a Ford pickup truck, you can buy a King Ranch model, which is a special deluxe pickup truck named after the King Ranch, which is a 800,000-acre ranch in Texas that's been in business since 1853. They're so big that they started their own breed of cattle, and it's one of the most widely known ranches in the world. And so Ford even markets a King Ranch pickup. So, it could be a big deal.
Well, that's a good segue into my part of the lecture. John, where'd you grow up? St. Louis, right?
Grew up in St. Louis.
Yeah. And not the inner city, but kind of a suburb of St. Louis, right? St. Louis has the inner city, and then it has and I'm sure that in your Ladue High School, right? Is that where you went to high school, Ladue?
It is.
That's what I thought. I've been to Ladue. Ladue is one of the most exclusive, richest places in St. Louis area. Not that John's
grew up in Normandy.
Okay. But if you were called a farmer at Ladue High School, I could see why there might be some stigma associated with that. But farmers are doing very well. Thank you very much. Median income for the farms in the country is $69,300, and that's well above the national median income for the nation, for the average household. Now, that's not, as Mark said, there's a broad spectrum of farms, right? There's some people who are just barely getting by. But in general, farming has changed dramatically. And in many communities, the bigger farmers are some of the wealthier people in the communities and most established, most prominent people in those communities. This work group is expected now. Something we're going to talk about is the National Farm Census. The National Agricultural Statistics Services does a farm census every 5 years. Okay, so we just did one in 2012. The data is now out, and I think I put that data. You can go and get more in-depth data, but I gave you a piece of that on Blackboard. But you could go to that website and get all kinds of information about farming and farm commodities. And in fact, you're going to have to throughout the class to do your homework, and then for any of your research questions, that is extremely valuable data. The last one before that was 2007. And we devour that information because it tells us how things are changing in agriculture. And one of the things that's going to change is this work group is expected to decline about another fifth over the next 5 years. We have fewer and fewer farms in the country every year. What do you think is happening to farm production? We have never been more productive in the history of the world. It is amazing, a massive amount of food. They can show, you walk down the street and look at the people. We're not getting any skinnier either. We're eating very well in the developed world, and we are able to produce more and more food cheaper with fewer people than ever before. Okay, so what do people do? What do these people do? Mark kind of gave you a concept of what a farmer is, but what sorts of things do they do? Well, farming is not a 9-to-5 kind of punch-the-clock job. It's a very, very different lifestyle. There are times when farmers will work days on end with very little sleep, particularly during planting and harvesting times. Very intense times of work. And there will be other times where you talk to your farmer friends and you're working your regular work day, And what are you doing all week? Well, goose season. I've been out on the lake hunting geese all week. I says, okay, what are you going to do next week? You got to be getting back into your farming operation. No, me and my boy, we're going out to Montana. We're going elk hunting out there. And so how do you have all this time? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. Well, some of these big, large cash crop farms, they work very intensely in the spring and sometimes in the summer because they have to be doing a lot of irrigation and stuff. And during harvest season, but their winter times are when they're planting. And there's a lot of planting. You don't just wake up one morning and say, I think I'll plant corn this year. There's a lot that goes into trying to decide, what am I going to plant? How do you think that works? Kristen, how do you think a farmer decides what they're going to plant? What kinds of factors would be, if you were going to plant something, what would go into your mind, what you want to plant?
Probably the weather.
Weather's a big factor. There's certain windows of opportunity for what you can plant. For example, you've got to get your corn out in April or May. You really don't want to push it into June because the growing seasons in most of the corn-producing areas aren't long enough. And so if it's a rainy spring and it's already Memorial Day and you don't have your crops in the ground, you're already calling up your friends at the seed store and saying, can you take this corn seed back off my hands and replace it with? What do you think they might replace it with? Soybean. The soybeans have a much tighter growing season. I've actually planted soybeans on 4th of July. And not a great crop, but made a decent crop of soybeans, even planting that late. So weather's a big factor. What's a major factor, though, Cassandra? What would be a major factor in what you're going to plant?
My fact would be government subsidy. How cheap it is to plant stuff.
You know it. Price. The subsidy thing, Mark didn't go into a lot of detail. This is probably the best lecture to kind of cover that. Is yes, there's subsidies, but there's the farm bill is written. How often does the farm bill come out? Every 5 years, just like the census, and that dramatically changes things depending on the way it is. People often think about that there's a lot of subsidies for farming, and that's not really true. I mean, he used the example of tobacco, and that was true. There was the part of the farm bill said that for all these tobacco farmers, particularly here in the southeast where there was a lot of tobacco grown, is on our farm we were allowed a half acre. And we could make several $1,000s on a half acre of tobacco. Mark's exactly right. That was often whichever kid needed a car or needed college money, they were in charge of the tobacco crop and they got the bulk of the money, but they also had to do the bulk of the work. And what that meant was that we're going to limit the amount of tobacco that is being produced. Thereby, we can also control the price, right? And often what they'll do is they'll set a floor. You can make more on a particular commodity, but we're going to guarantee that the price is at least this. We've done that in the dairy industry for years, so that you can make a decent amount of money on dairy. But this is the price, and the price. I don't have the guts to do this, but any of y'all have ever dealt in commodities? Everybody been on the commodities market? Yeah, you have to be made of sterner stuff than I am to invest in the commodities market. It's all about, or mostly about, supply and demand. The more you got, the less you get for it. The less you got, the higher the price. It's really largely that simple. But I can tell you an example of, let's see, what year would that have been? About 2005, 2006. My house in Iowa, I put in a corn burner. You ever seen a corn burning stove? I don't think they're very common. You've seen one?
Yeah.
Seen one, Joan?
Yeah, but more up north in New York.
Okay.
Someplace.
They're not very common here, but in Iowa, you burn corn. Yeah, they made these stoves, and what you would do, there's a little bin in the back, and you would fill that up with corn, and then you would start it. It took a little bit to get it ignited, but once you got a good fire going, is it had like a little gear in there that would just trickle in little pieces of corn, and that was your fire, and then there was like a fan that would blow across the firebox to heat your home. We thought this was a great idea because corn at that time was selling for about $2 a bushel. And it was a very cheap way to heat part of your house. I couldn't heat the whole house with it, but part of your house with corn burn. What's corn going for now, a bushel, Mark? Have you checked the commodity pricing?
Well, it's been up and down. It's been as high as $7 where people are making tons of money, but it's back down to 3.5 or something. It was weeks ago.
Oh, is it that low now? Yeah,
I
not
know
that,
it is right now, but it's been down in the threes again, so it's all over.
not long ago, it was up, as Mark said, up around $6 or $7. My corn burner sat idle for the last 2 years I was living in that Iowa. So see what it is? I'm going to want to know what can I grow that's going to make me some money. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Making a living. So yeah, they're gonna be planning that. They're also going to have to look at other things, like you can't, and this has been a problem, age-old problem in agriculture, is if corn is your cash crop or cotton, you know this story, right? The Old South, what did they do? They planted cotton every year. Every year they planted cotton. Well, cotton takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil. And so what they would have to do is, that's why the plantations had to get bigger and bigger and buy more land, because they gradually moved west because they just depleted the soil. So you do have to make some decisions there, as you can't plant corn every year without it depleting the soil. And what a lot of people do, you've heard of crop rotation. They'll go with crop rotation. Well, they're going to have to figure that sort of thing out. Is what is the soil really suited for? So I'm going to do my soil test. And how do they learn this stuff? How do these people learn how to do this? What do you think, Carrie? How do you learn?
Soil scientists,
Soil scientists where?
maybe here in UK.
You know, we have them in the UK, but we also have, I guess probably just about every county have an extension agent in Kentucky. 120 counties, we have 120 agents. Is that right? So yes, the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, has established an extension service for exactly these kinds of reasons. They are the farmer's advisor. They also do courses that you can take. We sign up for beef courses. Also, the guys that sell you the seed and the fertilizer and the chemicals and all that, they'll have courses as well where they bring in well-known experts to talk to you about these sorts of things. And it's not very expensive, but right over here on Red Mile is the Extension Service office, where you could go out and get a soil sample out of your garden or your pasture, take it over to them. I think it's like $15 or $20 for a soil test. They'll come back with a report and tell you exactly what sorts of nutrients you need, and even give you a list of the types of crops that would do well in that soil. So yeah, there's a lot of those kinds of. So, and I talk about my friends doing a lot of hunting, and that is true. They have a good time in the wintertime, but they also spend a tremendous amount of time in the shop. Farmers have to, it's be hard to stay in business as a farmer if you don't have some skills. You know, there are those farmers Mark talks about. I know a few of them that drive around town in their khaki pants, their white shirt, and their tie, and they pay for everything. And they have lunch at the local diner. Those guys are rare. Most farmers are doing their own carpentry, their own electrical work, their own mechanical work, their own welding. That's still true, even as they've gotten bigger and they've gone in span. They still have people that have skills, and they spend an awful lot of time, particularly in the off season, just getting that equipment up and ready to go. And of course, the facilities are constantly needing to be maintained. You got water pumps, you got pipes, you got hoses, you got fences, you got all these sorts of things. Well, I'm kind of giving a little bit of a flavor more of what it's like for these people of a grain crops. But there's, as Mark was talking about, there's also people who are ranchers, or even, excuse me, may call themselves farmers, but focus on either dairy or beef production or hog production or chicken production. Those guys aren't getting time off to go hunt, because that's an everyday, 365 days a year kind of job. So like we just took off to go up to my son's wedding up near Toledo. We had to have somebody watch our cows, right? Even though beef cows don't take as much work as a lot of animals, what if they ran out of water? A big old cow weighs 1,000 pounds, get thirsty real quick if there's no water. Have somebody check on that. We have to have eggs too, or I'm sorry, chickens too. Somebody's got to collect those eggs, make sure the eggs don't go. So animals are a little more intensive and take time in that regard. Okay, so you probably, whenever Mark says, what do you think about when you think about a farm? I can't really see that real well, can you? I don't think we can. I think it's actually all or none in this.
How bad is it?
Pretty bad, isn't it? What if I do that? Is that enough light? Or is it too much glare? How is it for the camera, Joan? Is any way to know?
We can fix it. It'll be fine. That's easier to see from back there.
Okay, is that better? We tried this for a while? Okay. All right, this is often maybe what you think about when you see, you see some fields and you see some gates and you see a dad and looks like his son on a tractor. This is an old picture. This is an old picture. Mark would know this. Do you have any idea, guess what year that truck, I think it's a Ford, judging from the blue and the white, late 60s?
Oh, I was going to say, it might not be an old picture because there's a lot of those out there yet. That's a tractor from the 70s, or late 60s, early 70s.
Late 60s, early 70s. That would have been very much what I grew up with. That's what you saw a lot back in the 60s. That would have been a decent-sized tractor back in the mid to late 60s. You could do a lot of work with a tractor like that. But nowadays, this is more like what you see. These things oh my gosh, these things are more comfortable than my office chair sitting on my computer. They're air-conditioned and well-heated, and they got stereo systems, and they got these executive chairs that are all ergonomically designed. So quite a bit of difference between the old days. And also
you pay for that, though, too.
You do pay for that, and something for us to talk about, this is probably the best lecture to talk about that, is a lot of farmers that have this kind of equipment. I mean, this kind of equipment costs more than most people's homes. Probably a tractor like that, $200,000 to $250,000. Think, Mark? Big one like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably $250,000 easy.
Same with the combine.
Yeah, same with the combine. I guess combine's getting up over $300,000 now, aren't they? Okay, so you're only going to buy those once in a while. Or what more and more farmers are doing is they're leasing them. So that you would have is it usually multi-year lease, or every year they get something different? Depends on the lease. So that's the advantage to that is you don't then own it, and you don't get the depreciation. That's the other thing that you can do in your taxes. You can depreciate the cost of this against your profits, but you can deduct the entire lease off of your taxes. So more farmers go into that sort of operation as well. When we talk about, since I show these pictures, this is supposed to be a health and safety study, right? What sorts of things what would you worry about somebody using that tractor? What kinds of issues?
The exhaust,
You got the exhaust, probably gasoline or diesel exhaust.
no roll cage.
No roll cage. So, Mark, is that your very next lecture? Is next week? He's going to talk about that. What's this here? That's the exhaust pipe. Where's it located? About 3 feet. Noise-induced hearing loss. Big problem in agriculture. Even still today, but particularly in those days, we had issues like that. So, yeah, we've changed things a lot. These help reduce noise levels. They certainly help reduce dust and exhaust levels, and are much more ergonomically designed. I gave you the website for it. I didn't happen to call it up, but something for you to know about is because agriculture is so diverse, for both research as well as general knowledge, whenever you're studying things, the North American Industrial Classification System. Have you run across this in other classes at all? Okay, this system is what's used to kind of stratify and categorize the different types of industries or jobs that are out there. Okay, so what I did was number 11 is agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. And this is really valuable when we do research because it allows us to segregate and stratify people. And a lot of times data is already coded with this. So for example, if you wanted to do a study and you said, I want to evaluate the injury rates, if you want to go to use survey data and you want to say, I want to compare the injury rates with fruit and nut growers compared to row crop people, you could pull out their NIAX code. So I encourage you to just, it won't take you long, just go to that website and just look through the NIAX website, and you'll see what that system is. And so whenever I'm doing analyses for various studies, often what they'll do is they'll give me a NIAX code, and they'll say, we want you to code this for the likelihood these people are exposed to pesticides. See what I would get? Karen?
Oh, I was going to ask the question.
Okay, question.
Sorry. Yeah, do they code for more than one, or is it just a prime?
Yeah, it depends. Most surveys, you get one shot. Now, what you can do is, it depends on how they set up the survey or set up the study. You can code things for a primary and or a secondary. That can be done. But most of the times when you're getting, this is the age of big data, right? If you were leading the study, you could go out and you could say, okay, I'm going to code this farmer, or I'm going to code this operation. And you can say, I think it fits best with this and this, right? But it is a lot of times when we're dealing with big data, they're only going to get one. But you can see, still, even though we do have farms getting more and more specialized, there's still enough diversity out there. I mean, there's lots of farms that are corn and soybeans, and they have cattle, or they're corn and soybeans, and they have a big orchard attached to them too. So, trying to define some farms into just one code is often not the best way to try and categorize them with just one code. Yeah, okay, I think we've kind of talked about most of this stuff. What's the agricultural life like? Well, they spend a lot of time outside. Well, there's issues associated with that. You got heat stress, and you got cold stress, right? Up in Wisconsin, where Mark's from, we commonly have have agricultural farmers and agricultural workers come in with chilblains or frostbite. They get involved in some operation, they're out there, and their feet get cold, they don't get them warmed up, and then they've got damaged tissue to their extremities. As we said, some farmers work with crops and vegetables while others work with livestock. Well, you're going to have exposures associated with that as well, right? Crops and livestock, you've got pesticides and fertilizers. With livestock, you've got animal danders, you've got the manure waste, so you've got gases and dust associated with it. Those are the sorts of things that we're going to be talking about as we go through this semester. Yeah, okay, so you've got operations where you still got relatively small farmers feeding the pigs, and then you've got these other farms where there's this huge operation where much of the feeding and watering operation might be mechanized. This is actually a picture of a colleague of ours. This is Risto, and he raises horses, and he actually runs the Ag Center at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. And every year I would take the students up to his farm when he was cleaning out the stalls to teach them how to sample and analyze for bioaerosols. And you can see see this dust mask that he's wearing? The mask started out white when he started cleaning out this stall. So still there's a lot of hand labor involved in agricultural operations. Okay, so where do they get this training? It's really, really very common nowadays that most farmers, I'd say probably over half of the people that are farm managers or farm producers have a degree in agriculture. That is a dramatic change over the years. But as farming has become more specialized and more sophisticated, more and more farmers have had college training at a College of Agriculture for this sort of stuff. But as I said, you also have the extension services. You have retailers. You have people that produce seed and fertilizer and things like that will also provide advice and training. And every state university system has at least one of these land grant colleges in their system. It still occurs that we have in agriculture more than just about any other industry sector children working on farms. By children, I'm including people under the age of 18. This is a big problem. We still have children that get killed and children who get injured or diseases from working on farms. This is, some people tell us that it's very much a lifestyle and not a job, and so they want the whole family involved in it. And I'm sure Mark has seen these examples, maybe even have some examples for you next week of where children have been killed in ag machinery accidents from being involved in those sorts of things. Okay, youth on this, that's another picture of the youth on the tractor without the roll bar. Okay, so I was talking about the median wages for the managers. They do quite well. For the average income for farmers is $69,300, and the total of all occupations is $34,000. So farming can be quite a lucrative profession as long as you're in the farm manager, farm production kind of mode. But of course, there's a vast number of workers out there that are considered agricultural workers. And these are the people who are doing most of the harvesting. They're doing most of the hands-on work, such as irrigating and maintaining things, servicing the machinery, doing the actual spraying and pesticide production, taking care of the livestock, and all these sorts of labor-intensive operations. And I know you guys have been to farms or at least seen things like this on television, where most of the fruit that is picked, it's very difficult to harvest any sort of a fruit. There are operations where they'll shake trees, but in all honesty, a lot of that damages the fruit and it can damage the tree. So still, the vast majority of our fruits and nuts are hand-picked. Very labor-intensive, certain amount of danger of people falling and getting hurt, as well as the ergonomic stresses on the reaching and the pulling and the having a bucket or some sort of a gathering device strapped to them. A lot of stoop labor, where people are bent over for hours on end harvesting the crops, and as well as a certain level of mechanization in which they're involved in. Okay. This is a picture of a worker harvesting mushrooms, and so we don't often think of mushroom as being a farm, but actually the mushrooms are grown on organic material, which tends to be mostly hay infusion and manure, and those mushrooms are all hand harvested. So workers come along with a knife and cut those. So there's the potential for being cut. There's the potential for falling, as well as the ergonomic stresses of collecting these mushrooms. Okay, so question. Yeah.
Are they typically paid by hour or how much they are able to?
It will depend, but in most of the agricultural work, when you're talking about the picking and the harvesting, it's mostly piecework. So with the mushroom farmers, I can tell you that particular mushroom farm, they harvested mushrooms every day, 365 days a year. There were people who worked, and that young woman happened to be a Vietnamese immigrant. That young woman worked 365 days a year. And that picture was taken in 1988. She made $35,000 that year picking mushrooms. Now, turning the clock back to 1988, that's pretty darn good wage. I think how hard she was working to maintain that. And what she did was you could probably tell from the picture, she's a fairly young woman. She could pick mushrooms like crazy. And if she was in with her family and they were all doing this, they could do quite well, couldn't they? Yeah, and now that was piecework, and they lived there. That wasn't migratory. They lived there, but she was paid on the piecework. Allie?
Standing on like.
Yeah, those things. What you would do is she would be on the floor for the first few. You know, the low one she'd have to get down like this, and then gradually get up, and then she'd have to climb up like this to get on the others, and then move along those. Bring it back. There were falls and there were cuts with the knife. She just had like a little knife that she would cut it with one hand and then pick the mushroom and put it in the case. So yeah, this thing's a bit bulky, and trying to maneuver in that space. And you can see, so eventually she's going to get up. There's another level up there. She's going to be standing on these eventually to harvest those up at the top. This would probably be piecework. A lot of these harvesting operations of vegetables, the vegetables aren't something where you harvest 365 days a year, right? There's a season. So people might be here harvesting, it looks like it's either apples or cherries, harvesting that for a few weeks. The crop's done, then they're migratory. they move on to somewhere else to provide agricultural support. These workers are definitely paid piecework. Okay, now Mark mentioned some other types of workers, though, and we have them right here. We don't have, I don't know if there's a dairy I don't think there's a single dairy in Fayette County, is there?
Probably not.
Yeah. But we have a lot of horse farms. Go out to those horse farms, and what you're mostly going to see? Hispanic workers. And they're going to be doing the grooming and cleaning out the stalls and giving the horses their exercise and all those sorts of things, making sure they get fed and watered properly. They live either on the farm or near those farms. A lot of the farms, like the farm that's right next to me is a thoroughbred farm, and it has a series of little houses, little cottages that the workers live in. That's not piecework. They're paid a wage to do the work. Now, they are also working basically every day. They probably do have some time off, but the horses have to be taken care of every day. Somebody's doing that work. And those are not paid by the piece. They're given some sort of an agreed-upon salary to take care of.
They move around the farms too, like they'll start at the start of the pay period and quit when the pay period ends.
We actually have a study going on through our Ag Center to learn more about the health and safety issues of that. If you want to do, John's working on this. John, it's actually your capstone study as well, right? Yeah. So,
respiratory health of Latino.
What's
the respiratory health of horse workers here.
That particular study it started out with more injuries and has moved more toward respiratory disease. We had a MPH student get her capstone on listeria among that population a few years ago. As listeria is a bacteriological disease that can be passed on largely through feces and urine. And she was looking at collecting blood samples and using an ELISA test that had been developed here at University of Kentucky to evaluate their exposure to listeria. Listeria is one of those diseases where you can get it and not really have much in the way of symptoms, or it could actually be quite a serious disease. So she was looking at the occurrence of listeria infections among the horse population. Okay. So what do we expect to happen even among agricultural workers? Not as much of a decline. Remember we said about a 20% decline among ag producers and farmers. Probably going to stay relatively stable, but a slight decline in people who are in this industry. And you would assume that would be occurring because the number of farms is going down, and we continue to come up with ways to increase the mechanization of our farming operations. Okay. Now, these are people who don't do as well lucratively. Remember, the average of all occupations was almost $35,000. These agricultural workers typically make below $20,000 a year. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. This is important for you to be familiar with this data. I gave you on Blackboard. I provided you this census of the U.S. 2012 Ag Census. Go to this website and look over, of course, the questionnaire. This is the kind of data they collect. Who gets this census? Who gets mailed the census? Devin, who do you think gets mailed the census?
Everybody gets census, but that one might be a particular one.
Yeah, who are that? Who are those people?
You're registered, right? If you go to the registry.
How do you get registered as a farmer? Do you go? Is there like a national farm registry? There's not. Well, how did they determine who's a farmer? What was the definition of a farmer to begin with? What did Mark say? When you make $1,000, you're a farmer. So you think I'm listed as a farmer? Yeah, I'm listed as a farmer. Yeah, I didn't make a lot, but made a little money on the cows last year. Over $1,000. I don't mind telling you that. So yeah, we're listed as a farmer. So how do they know I'm listed as a farmer and I made over $1,000? Taxes. Who said that? Yeah, of course. Come on. You have to fill out taxes, and whenever you report your farm, anybody fill out Schedule F besides me? Okay, and Joan, Mark, you don't fill out Schedule F. Schedule F is farm income. So, you have your 1040 form and you have your A and B schedules. Schedule F is for farmers. So if you made any money, you have to declare that money that you made. Now, the good thing about Schedule F is you can also write off a lot of your expenses. So most of us don't technically make any money at the end of the year. But yeah, that is, so they can go to that database, can't they? And they can determine. Also, did you know farmers are tax exempt on certain things? Yeah. You go to the farm store, if you go to Tractor Supply or what is the other one? Southern States. Southern States is a cooperative. You go into Southern States and you say, I want to buy this nice water tank. I'm going to use it as my swimming pool. That's something that sounds like John might want to do is, okay, take a big cattle tank and turn it into his swimming pool. Okay. So he's, they would, so they would say, well, okay, Mr. Flinker, are you a farmer? And you can say yes or no, and they'd say, well, if you say yes, you've got to give them your number, which is basically your social security number or your corporate number, and you wouldn't have to pay state sales tax on that commodity. So they can go, they do this, they go out to retailers and they find out who is classifying themselves and getting this tax exempt status. Okay, so then what they do is they start mailing this to you in the mail, and they hope that most people will dutifully sit down right away and fill out this form. And this form is not easy to fill out. It takes quite a bit of effort as you look through it. There's a lot of questions. And what most people do is they file it away and they don't work on it, and then they'll send you another one. And then they'll start calling you. And they'll eventually, I don't know if they've never done it to us because we've always sent, I don't know if they send people around like they do with the national census that's done every 10 years. It's never happened to us. Do you know, Mark, that they actually go to your door? And
I don't think so. They do send people out to find farms where they have to identify, say, someone who maybe didn't file any tax, Schedule F, but they think they're a farmer. They have ways. They have a method of finding farms.
Yeah, it's written up in that handout I gave you. Is the methodology for that? Well, this data all goes into Washington D.C. And this is great data to let us know what's going on out there in agriculture. Now, the driving force behind this is economics, right? Ag commodities, ag products are a big part of our gross domestic product. They're not the biggest part, but they're a big part. So for us to know how our farms are doing from an economic standpoint is great. But how can I use this data? Who haven't I picked on? Just about everybody's got at least one question. Maybe Lindsay. I haven't picked on Lindsay yet. Lindsay, right? Okay. How can I use this data from a research standpoint for health and safety research standpoint?
Track injuries based on the people who said that they are implanted?
Yeah. Injuries and disease. For example, cancer is kind of my area. That's one of my main research areas. Do you think farmers get higher rates of cancer than the general population? There's a hypothesis, yes or no. Do you think they do, Jay? They don't. Well, let me qualify that. Cancer. Cancer is like my NIACS code, right? There's all different kinds of codes for cancer. Well, no. Farmers have lower lung cancer rates, lower breast cancer rates, and lower colon cancer rates. Those are the big cancers, aren't they? Those are the ones that are the most common and they kill the most people. What types of cancers do you think farmers do get the most of? Skin. They're out. What did we say on a slide a little while ago? They're outdoors. They're exposed to skin, to ultraviolet light, a lot of sun exposure. So farmers have a much higher rate of skin cancer. Is that true across all types of farmers? See, that's how you can use data like this. I'd like to look at it. I want to see what subset of farmers has the higher rate of skin cancer. And why would that be valuable? That's where, because controlling skin cancer, what is the best way for us to control skin cancer? Cut down on sun exposure, right? So where would I target my public service announcements? And who would be the people I'd want to talk to? So if somebody went to Kristen, and Kristen happened, she was their physician, she happened to know that they were a soybean farmer. She said, oh, I bet you spend a lot of time outside. I don't know if you do it yourself or refer to somebody to maybe do a skin exam every so often to look for melanoma or some of the other forms of skin cancer. Right. Okay. So respiratory diseases, cancers, injury rates. We can use this kind of data to try and segregate people by types of farm, size of farm. Also, there are questions in there about certain types of chemical uses. How much fertilizer you use, how much pesticide you use. Well, another form of cancer that is higher in farmers than the general population is lymphoma. It's been somewhat controversial as to why farmers have higher rates of lymphoma. And if you look at the National Cancer Institute's data, they're arguing that it's largely due to certain types of herbicides in particular that have increased your risk for that. Farmers use a lot of neurologic agents to kill insects, organophosphates, carbamates. An interest of mine is, does that increase your risk for Parkinson's disease and dementia? So see how I could go to the national database and I could try and match, I could do a linkage, couldn't I, of farmers to the state cancer registry, and I say, okay, of all the Kentucky people in Kentucky listed as farmers, I want to look at them and stratify them by types of farmers, and those that said they used the most organophosphate or carbamate pesticides, did they also have higher rates of a particular type of neurologic cancer or something like that? See how we can do that? This will be valuable to you to know these kinds of data and get familiar with the National Ag